Assalamu alaikum, namaste, sasri akal. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Farheen Khan, and you're watching the AZEEZA show. And this week, we're going to talk about the power of storytelling. We all know that stories, can make a significant impact. And with me today is our guest, Erin Kang. Hi. Welcome, Erin, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. So, Erin, I know that you have an organization called Story of Ours, and wanted to kind of, maybe jump right into it, and maybe you can start and tell us like who you are and like what you do.
Sure. So my name is Erin Kang. I'm a Korean-Canadian daughter of immigrants here in Toronto. And professionally, I work as a facilitator, a consultant, a speaker. And Stories of Ours is a personal project I started a few years ago, about 4 years ago now. We are a grassroots project. We use stories and art to challenge dominant narratives, to make space for voices that are not often heard in these kinds of spaces, and to really work towards deepening community and increasing solidarity, building bridges between communities through sharing personal experience.
And what inspired you to start this?
Yeah, it's actually an amazing story. So I've been writing my entire life. It's how I process. I've been journaling forever. And so I've used writing really as a healing tool through, get through lots of things.
For sure, I hear that.
Yeah, and many people do. It's such an accessible thing for people to be able to do, right? Everybody is a writer. So my mom actually came to Canada when she was 24, and I was 24 at the time I started the project.
Oh, interesting.
And a few months before the very first Stories of Ours event, I had started exploring sharing my own personal stories at a project that my other friends started, where they gathered in people's living rooms and just worked with people to share personal stories in a very intimate setting. And I really just witnessed firsthand how healing and cathartic and amazing it was to be able to stand in front of strangers, talk about something that I had held in or not allowed myself to speak about, and then to find connection with not only people I already knew, but folks who I didn't know, and having such an amazing connection just from that first encounter. And I was speaking with my mom. We're very close. It's the family is me, my mom, and my sister, so we're very tight-knit. And we all live in Toronto, so we see each other very often. And we were talking, and I'm still a little bit embarrassed about this. I grew up in Canada, and my mom, even though she has been here for so many years, we grew up in quite a small homogenous town, and there was not a lot of people who looked like us. And even when we moved to Toronto later in our years, her circle remained very much other Korean Canadian people, which is amazing. You need that community.
For sure.
But because of this, and for various personality reasons as well, my mom is just more private than me. I realized, oh my God, my mom actually doesn't see any connection between, looking at someone who came here from Iran or looking at someone who came here from Jamaica. She doesn't see any kind of connection with these people, and she just sees them as so different. And then in addition, as I mentioned, I had found so much healing and so much solace in connecting with others through my personal experience. It really just struck me how, my mom had been holding so much stuff inside. So I decided to host a storytelling event focused specifically on immigration stories. So it was 6 people from different countries sharing either their journey to Canada or their like uncle or grandfather and stuff like that. And it was supposed to just be a one-off event, very casual, but we got an amazing turnout, and everyone was so eager to hear these stories and to tell their own, and it just grew from there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what, so do you, certainly, telling a story is, for a person, can be very cathartic, but it can also be, put yourself in a very vulnerable state, right? So the people, like, what can you give us an example of some of the kinds of stories that you've heard through this process?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Stories of Ours runs bi-monthly events, which
Okay.
means we have an event every other month, and we feature about 6 people every time.
Right.
And so we've had so many stories and art pieces come through. I'll sort of speak to both parts of your question.
Sure.
First, I'll share an example of a story that has really stuck with me. It was a story that happened in one of the earlier events,
Right.
and is available online. Actually, we do have videos on our website, so
Okay.
it is publicly viewable.
Cool.
But basically, it seems like a very mundane story at first. You know, a teenager is going to buy their first guitar at the guitar store downtown. But with additional context, it's a South Asian woman, you know, she plays punk. She went to the store with her entire family in tow.
Right.
And for various reasons and for the various ways that she was read in this space, it ended up being a very sort of demoralizing and dehumanizing experience,
Really?
just to simply buy a guitar.
Right.
Who gets to play in those spaces? Who gets to claim these spaces? And you know, she's an amazing person, so she's still an amazing musician to this day, and really pushes boundaries with punk. It's amazing. But this story was so resonant because, again, you know, we're so lucky here in Toronto to have such a diversity of background to learn from, to grow from. But when you grow up in a specific context where perhaps your story is not being told by you, it's other people's stories about you
Yes.
that are defining who you are,
Right.
and how profound of an impact that has on you as a person, your self-worth. I
sure.
myself struggled with so much anti-Asian racism because
Right.
I grew up despising who I was, right? And so to just hear somebody else share an aspect of their story and to be able to see, oh, other people struggle with this too,
Right.
Or even on the other side, oh, I didn't know that this could happen, right?
Right.
It is so eye-opening.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, and I know that, like, when I was, like, so I've written 2 books about my story, and that's where, like, the journaling thing is just huge, right? Because I never expected that I would write. It was all about, you know, how could I just, like, let go of some of the things that I've experienced, and other people just really can't, you know, perhaps may not relate to or don't really get it to the full extent of what it feels like. And a lot of that had to do with Islamophobia, right? Especially in the beginning, because it was post 9/11, I was attacked, and, like, you know, being South Asian and stuff, it was like, well, you know, you don't talk about those things, right? It's over, like, just don't talk about it, you know, shove it on the rug, and like my father said, like, switch off the light, it's over, right? You're safe now, it's fine. And it was really hard because it was like, okay, well, how do I actually, you know, let go of some of that stuff and just be like, okay, you know, nobody will truly get what I'm actually feeling and how isolated I felt. So the book was for me, very cathartic because I was able to actually share some of that stuff. But at the same time, it was just like, I think a lot of the things that I talked about in that, and I know that a lot of, and I'd love to hear, like, what your thoughts are, right, in terms of some of the stories. Like, for me, it was like really pushing the envelope, right, and really talking about things that were sort of almost like taboo, or that there's a lot of stigma around, like mental health, and, you know, sort of the depression that I had to go through to kind of, you know, like after, like many women do, right, like this whole, you know, you go through an attack and there's this whole self-hate, self-loathing kind of stuff, right, and so, you know, and thinking, you know, suicidal ideations, like the whole thing, right, so being able to kind of go through that, and then actually, you know, afterwards now, like, hearing women, you know, who reach out to me from many places around the world who are like, oh, I read your book, and, you know, I feel like you spoke the words of my heart, right? It's so nice to hear that, because I'm like, and when I first wrote it, I was like, I don't think anybody's going to read this, but like, hey, you know, if it gets out there, maybe it'll benefit somebody. So what do you think?
I mean, that's exactly it. You said so many things. A lot of the people I work with have never thought that they would share a story, speak publicly. Some of them have been in the country for 2 months, have, you know, different languages as their first or second language. And often they'll come to me and say, oh, I don't think anyone's going to want to hear this, but this is what I have to say. Or, you know, I really want to come and talk about something, but I don't think anything interesting really happened to me, you know? And what you said, you know, our reach is so profound. You don't know what impact your story is going to have. You don't know, you know, the extent to which someone might be, oh, I'm not alone. You know, these things as you mentioned, are taboo. It's difficult to talk about mental health publicly, and especially if you come from different contexts, different cultural contexts. A lot of the reason my mom would not talk about stuff is you don't talk about things that happen in the home.
Right.
It's very taboo to leave your husband,
Right.
to escape abuse.
Right.
These are things that in her perspective would weaken her,
Right.
which was so fascinating for me because I think it strengthens you.
Well,
right?
exactly. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting, right? I mean, like that's the whole thing. It's like, you know, how do you take that story, that really, you know, very intimate experience, right? That memory, if you will, and share it in a way that really, you know, amplifies that message, right? And that's the piece that I think is so fascinating about the work that you're doing.
Thank
you know,
you.
it's just like, so, you know, what, like, if you were to give advice to somebody who is actually thinking about telling a story, like I know people you reach out to for your shows and your events. So what kind of advice do you give people?
So I do work personally with everybody who comes on to tell a story. Of course, with artists, they share their work.
Right.
But I do, you know, make the effort to meet with or at least have a phone conversation
Right.
with the person who's coming on to share.
Right.
There's sort of three main things that I think are central to every relationship I've had working on these stories.
Sorry to interrupt you. Why don't we just take a quick break and then we'll
Sure.
be back?
No problem.
All right, we'll be back right after this. Hey everyone, welcome back to the AZEEZA show. I'm just here with our guest, Erin. So Erin, you were just telling us, so when you talk to people, you know, for your show and for your events, what's some of the pointers and advice do you give to people who are preparing to share their story?
The first, I think, is really critical reflection on, you know, why do I want to share the story right now?
Right.
Why this space? Why to these folks? I think often we can get caught in, oh, I need to do certain things, or this is the way to heal. You should always do what feels right, right? Sometimes with working with people, we've discovered together that this is not the right time for them to tell this story.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you might want to, but maybe you haven't gotten to the point where you're ready to.
Right.
So I really encourage people to think intentionally about the motivation behind why they want to share this story.
Right, which is important for sure.
It also helps us to avoid pitfalls. For example, you know, I was working on a story, a written piece, and then I realized I was actually sort of speaking for another person and that this wasn't my story to tell. And that I needed to go through that process to understand my relationship to what had happened and all of that.
Right.
But it wasn't my place to tell this story.
Right.
So really reflecting on the motivation.
Right.
And then once you sort of get to a point where, okay, this is the story I want to share,
Right.
really leaning towards radical honesty. I think especially for folks who are getting ready to share a story publicly, so
Right.
at an event, in a publication,
Yes.
something like that,
Yes.
there's a real fear of what would happen if we stick to the facts, if we stick to really what happened, to rationalize what happened, or to seek maybe approval or forgiveness or something through the process of sharing. You know, when I share stories, I have to remember this myself, to not be scared to stand in front of people and tell them about something bad I did, or just me before I learned a lesson. And so, you know, we can get into embellishments when we talk about storytelling and think about, oh, well, you know, my story isn't, you know, about, it's not an epic tale of this and that. But you speaking your own truth is the most radical thing you can do. And you know, I think that if you're taking such a brave leap to share something publicly,
Right.
you owe it to yourself and to whoever is hearing your story to be honest.
For sure.
And then the third really is to seek community. So like talk to your friends and family and loved ones and talk your story out, seek their insight. I often have fuzzy memory and I'll talk to my mom about something that happened, you know, write a draft that you know is a first draft and send it to somebody you trust and
Right.
ask them, you know, Can you look for places where you think I'm holding back?
Right.
Can you see anything that I should be talking about that maybe I'm not?
Right.
That's mainly the process I take when I'm coaching someone to tell their story.
Right.
Is just working through it iteratively and getting as many people's feedback as possible. Yeah.
And do you feel that, I mean, I'm sure, I mean, I'll ask the question anyway. I have my thoughts about this. But do you feel that the work that you're doing is actually impacting, like, you know, it's beyond just impacting the individuals that tell the story? Do you feel like there's actually a larger impact with the work that you're doing?
I definitely think so.
Okay.
As just a small sliver of grassroots activity that's happening in the city and in the province, I know that every single person who walks into that room is walking away changed. And it's not like, you know, a huge, profound change every single time, but there's actually studies, and this is a study on video games, but it'll be relevant in like 2 seconds. But there's a study that looks at brain activity with people who are playing the same game side by side, because you're going through the same sort of challenges together and you're problem solving together and you're doing things together. So when you take that principle of shared experience and you take it into a room of 75 folks from all different places, of all different ages, of all different life experience, and when you're hearing a story, you're not watching something, you're making something in your head. You're applying your vision and your experience to whatever you're hearing. So in that room, 75 brains are processing this one auditory input together. It's actual energy that's happening in that room. And so even beyond the content of a story impacting you, that solidarity and that togetherness that you're feeling in the room is not something we often experience on a day-to-day basis. I'm always buzzing for days after an event. And so I definitely think, you know, even just one conversation with you has impacted my life. Stories are such a profound and simple way to connect us and to bridge our differences. And this is not even any praise for me personally. This is like everyone who has come into the show has made it what it is. And I know that it impacts people.
That's fantastic. That's the thing. So where do you see yourself going from here?
Yeah, well, so initially the vision with Stories of Ours was always to stay rooted in community. And so I really wanted, or I hoped for the project to sort of act as a bit of a connective tissue between other amazing projects happening in the city. Even thinking about you and the ways that our work overlap and connect and amplify each other's. But because we're grassroots and have no budget, and it's basically you know, me and some amazing volunteers who donate their time. That has not necessarily actualized in the scale I've wanted. We've grown such an amazing network. But I'm actually thinking now that we're nearing 4 years, I don't want this to just be something that I own. So I'm putting together right now an advisory committee, which I'm hoping to populate mostly with young women, to help me sort of co-vision what the next steps are and think about what we've done already and how we can move forward. I really want to, I don't want to be the driving force behind it. Yeah.
That's very cool. That's very cool.
Thank you.
So what's, I'm trying to think, I remember when I did my, like, have you had any, like, the reactions, like you said, people are changed when they leave the room, right? What happens when, have you had any negative reactions to some of the work that you've seen, or has it been relatively positive?
On the most part, it's positive. I feel very fortunate for that. I have noticed that the space that we've created together has gotten a little more political over the years, and I enjoy that. I think art is political, and I want to use the arts as a mean to resist. And so there's always going to be folks who maybe we don't see eye to eye with, but I've been fortunate enough not to receive any, you know, very negative feedback or anything.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know that when I launched my first book, there was a lot of sort of questions in my mind, right? About like what I was going to share and how personal I was going to become with the story, specifically around like gender-based Islamophobia. So I remember having a huge room, like there was like 300 people who I'd invited to this place, and to this day there are some people that came to that day, like that room, who still don't associate with me, right? Because they feel that, you know, I aired the community's dirty laundry and then that was inappropriate. And there are some who, you know, have gone to grow to become far more than just friends or more like family, you know? And I know that that's part of the process, you know, it's like, okay, well, you know, no matter what, the story is mine to share, and I'm sharing it, you know, with the authenticity that I need to share it with, and those that, you know, appreciate the story will be there for me no matter what.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think because I try my best to always stay in a place grounded in sort of love and compassion, even when I disagree, even if I feel negatively, or people have hurt me, I try to remember that because that's how I try to behave and act and stay grounded in that. I hope that I'm, you know, not hurting folks through the work I do, and that's all I can ask for.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've only got a few minutes left. Do you have any last minute words for the audience that you want to share with them?
I guess I would say, I know I've been speaking to the power of story and vulnerability, but that's not to say that everybody should be publicly speaking about all of their experiences right now. It's one way of connection, it's one way of helping bridge differences and community, but it's not for everybody, and it's enough to listen. It's enough to be open to learning just by listening to other folks. So I think that would be the main message I have today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll definitely check out your website and
Thanks.
get others to do that as well. Thanks
Great.
again. All right, everyone. So thank you for watching this week. I just wanted to say that, you know, there's so much, like Erin said, it's not just about telling the story. Sometimes it's just about journaling and sharing your own experience, putting it on paper. We all go through difficult times, and it's important for us to make a note sometimes. Just let it go. All right, until next week, take care. See you then.